Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is video 17C. So this is the third part of this video that we've been talking about the prophets. And on today's video, inshallah, we're going to continue. The last video we talked about Ishaq alayhi salam. So now we're just kind of going down the list. We're going to be talking about Yaqub alayhi salam. So we will go ahead and put his name up here. Yaqub alayhi salam. Okay. Yaqub alayhi salam was the second son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Sorry, I apologize. He is Ishaq alayhi salam's son, and of course he is the father. Yaqub alayhi salam is the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, so we kind of keep that in mind. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of do a little division here. Okay. Now, Yaqub alayhi salam, of course, he's the lineage is from prophets, so the grandfather Ibrahim alayhi salam was a prophet, and then his father Ishaq alayhi salam was a prophet, and then he himself Yaqub alayhi salam is a prophet. So it's just going down and down. So it's like a noble lineage. Um, Yaqub alayhi salam, of course, he again, as always, they invited people to Islam and to submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he had traveled as he was a young man. He traveled through the land to different places, um, migrated because of his religion and his deen. And so, long story short, we're going to cut all of that part off and get to towards the end of his life, where a lot of this other stuff that happened. Well, not end of his life, but where actually when from the time that he actually got married, and then the rest of the stuff that's happened. So Yaqub alayhi salam, he had traveled to um, this the land where his uncle, paternal uncle, used to live there. Since he was a young man, so he arrived there, and he had noticed that his uncle had two daughters, and so we will go ahead and put their names here, so because that way we can look at it, and as we're telling the story, we can know who are we talking about. So the uncle of Yaqub alayhi salam, his name was Laban, and he had two daughters. Let's just do this so we're not confused. So we have the uncle here, and then from here the uncle had two daughters. The older one was Leah, and then the younger one was Rahil. Now, it is said from the stories that we've read, the stories of the prophets and in those books, it is said that Rahil is so let's just put the second sister. She's the first one, and she was the more prettier one, so we'll just put a. And so when Yaqub alayhi salam comes, to meet his uncle and then he sees that, the two daughters, and of course, he wants to be. So he asked, he do the noble thing, and he asked his uncle if he could marry his daughter. And the uncle, Laban, agreed, and he said, well, if you work for me, basically like stay with us and work with me or for me for 7 years, then I will marry you, my daughter. So Yaqub alayhi salam did stay, and he worked for 7 years, worked very hard, and on the completion of his 7 years, uh, then the uncle throws a big feast and invites all the relatives and family and whatnot, and so he is married off to the daughter of Laban. And at the night of the wedding, Yaqub alayhi salam realizes that he is married to this daughter, the first one, not to the one that he wanted to. So in the morning, he talks to his uncle and he said, why did you deceive me like this? We had talked about it, and, why did you do this to me? So his uncle said that in our culture, basically, it is not polite, or is not right, it is not befitting to marry the second daughter first while the older daughter, or the first daughter, is just still there. So basically, that's the reason that we married you to her. So Yaqub alayhi salam, of course, he's a prophet, and of course he's gonna stay, and that's what the deal is. But then the uncle said, he said that, well, if you stay with us another 7 years and work with us and work for me, then I will marry you to my second daughter. So Yaqub alayhi salam, decided to stay there and work for another 7 years with his uncle. And then when the time came and time was up, then sure enough, he was married to Rahil, the other daughter. Okay. Now, when the uncle married off the daughters to him, and now you're probably wondering why two sisters are marrying the same man, but back in those days, we're talking, I don't know, thousands of years ago, these kind of customs were allowed, and then after, I don't know, it's tradition, culture, whatever it was allowed back then. We don't do that anymore nowadays, but back then it was allowed. So, anyways, each one of these daughters were given a slave girl, and let's just put a slave girl here, and then another here, slave girl. I don't like to really call it slave girl. Back in those days, this kind of stuff was very, very common. So basically, they had this person that kind of helped them with everything around the house, with their kids or whatever. They did work and whatnot. So they each one had one of these. Now from Leah, Yaqub alayhi salam had six. I'm going to write it over here. 6 sons from the older sister, and 1 daughter. Okay. Now on this side, Rahil was not able to conceive, so she was feeling really, really bad. Like, she give, her husband the short end of stick or whatever. She's here's this sister giving, mashallah, all these kids, and then she, even though she's beautiful and she's pretty and all of that, but she's not able to give her husband any children. So she does, I guess, I don't know, the noble thing. So she offers her slave girl to Yaqub alayhi salam, that if I can't have any kids for you, I can't bear any children, then here's the slave girl, and, so, you know, maybe you can have children with her. So sure enough, Yaqub alayhi salam marries her, whatnot, and then he has 2 sons from the slave girl. Now they're kind of going back and forth, and then this daughter, she realizes that, my sister's doing this, so I don't want to be falling behind, so I'm going to do the same thing as she did. So she offers her slave girl to Yaqub alayhi salam, and then Yaqub alayhi salam has 2 sons from here. Okay, so you got two sons here, two sons here. You got six sons from her and a daughter. And, life goes on and on and on. So one day, Rahil makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that because she didn't want to have her own kids, she made a dua that, for her to conceive and have kids. So her dua was accepted, and then Rahil had a son, and that was Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam. She has another son, but it's coming later, so I should just write that down. Like a few, as they're kind of like nomads. They're going through the land. They're traveling here and there in different areas. So here she will have later on have another son, and his name is in English we say Benjamin, or it says Benjamin. Benjamin. So those are the two sons that comes from Rahil, and then after this son that's born, then she passes away, and that's that. So now we have two sons here. You got here, here, and all of that. So, mashallah, if you add all of these, it comes to 12, 12 sons, which Yaqub alayhi salam had 12 sons in total. And then a daughter. I think her name was Dina. Okay. I'm trying to make sure that I have not skipped over anything. No. Okay. So, mashallah, so if we remember, Yaqub alayhi salam is still with his uncle Laban, even though the duration of the time that he has 7 years the first time, and then 7 years the second time, it's way past that. So he has stayed with his uncle all these years, and mashallah, having all these kids and this huge family or whatnot. He's still there, but now he wants to meet his original family, like Yaqub alayhi salam, to meet his brother. The name of his brother is something else, but anyways, I can't remember his name right now. But um, he wanted to go back, and see him and his children and whatnot and all of that. So he decides to leave and go. And as they're traveling, um, they're in the middle of somewhere. It's he comes across this seems to be a man that he's trying to figure out who this person is. So he's like wrestling with him, and he's about to like beat him, overpower him, and then at the last minute, then the man just kind of flips Yaqub alayhi salam upside down, and then he asks him like, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Yaqub," and then he says, "Well, after today, your name is not Yaqub alayhi salam. I mean, not he didn't say alayhi salam, but I mean, he said that your name Yaqub is not befitting you, and from now on, you should call yourself Israel." And so Yaqub alayhi salam, he just like, so he's about to ask the man, like, well, he asks him, he's like, well, who are you and where are you from? And before he knows it, that the man disappears. So at that moment, then he realizes that that was an angel that came down. So it was an angel that came down and told him that your nickname will be Israel. So, and that's why today when we recite in the Quran, Bani Israel, Bani Israel. So that's another name for Yaqub alayhi salam. Also, then finally, Yaqub alayhi salam with all of his family goes back and meets his brother, and his brother is very happy to meet him. and all of that. And then, he stays wherever he stays. And then after that, then we get connected to the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, how that happens. And then inshallah, we continue from there. Until next time, assalamu alaikum.